Now, if you remember back to when we were doing the heart on Monday, we were able to see the ventricles a lot better, or excuse me, the atrium a lot better on the posterior side of the heart, remember? When you open up the heart, that's often true. So if you look at this heart, and I'll point out the reasoning for like why I know this in a second so that you guys can also know this, but you see that the atriums are only on this side of the heart, and you don't really see them too well on this side, okay? That often happens, all right? So if you don't have atrium showing on both sides, that's okay. All right, it's just kind of a nature of how we cut it. Now, the reason that I know that this is the atrium versus the ventricle, which will be below, obviously, is that this region right here is the atrioventricular valve. And I know that because I see the chordae tendineae. So those chordae tendineae are going to be really helpful in helping decide a lot of things about the internal structure of the heart. So if we can find those chordae tendineae, we've now found essentially like 5 or 6 structures. We know that they're attaching to the papillary muscles, so all the muscles that they go down to are the papillary muscles. We know the structure above them, right here, will be the atrioventricular valve. We know that everything below that is going to be a ventricle. Everything above that is an atrium. Okay, so the first thing I like to do when I cut open the heart is find this chordae tendineae section, because it'll help you orient yourself for what you're looking at, all right? If we look on this side, we can see chordae tendineae over here and the other half of the valve that was here also. So we also know that this is ventricle and that what would have been above this is atrium. Now, this area right here is still part of the ventricle, all right? The vessel or the valve would stop right here and attach to this area here. This is the area of the ventricle that's going to be pumping blood to the aorta. So this little patch right there and actually right here would be the aorta. So remember there's going to be this holding cavity and then a passageway also where it's going to be dumping blood into the systemic or pulmonary system depending on which side you're looking at. Now one more important thing that I forgot to note, how do you tell the right from the left when you have the heart open like this? The larger one's the left one, all right? The left side of the heart pumps blood to the entire body, whereas the right side of the heart only pumps blood to the lungs. So you have a lot more musculature on that left side, and the actual cavity itself is bigger. So the bigger side will be the left side. Smaller side will be the right side. Okay? So a few more things to note about the anatomy. I pointed out the valves. So if we know that this is the left ventricle, then what valve would this be? Bicuspid, right? You try before you buy, so bicuspid comes second in the left ventricle. And here you can see, this is kind of a darker color, but here we can see another valve. What valve would this be? The tricuspid, right? The other one. And their general name is atrioventricular valves. So for this valve, if this is the valve, that means that down here we have the ventricle, up here would be the atrium. Okay, now the other valve, if you cut it open all the way like this, which you can do, but I recommend doing it a little bit lower, so actually it's going to be the top of the heart first, so that you don't cut open the semilunar valves, okay, because you want to maintain those. Remember I said that the semilunar valves kind of look like little bubbles on bubble wrap? We have them surrounding this aorta right here. So this is basically a broken piece of bubble wrap that was a part of the semilunar valve. You have another one here, that'd be the second one. And then the third one is actually over here. Because remember, it's kind of like a clamshell, so if you shut it, this would be right here. That'd be the third one. So if you don't cut it as far open, you'll be able to see all 3 of those in a ring around this upper portion of the heart. Okay? This is where they are. I'm showing them so that you like have a better idea of where to look for them. This is not what I would consider a testable semilunar valve. For 2 reasons. It's broken like that, and I would want to see it a little more associated with the vessel that it's attached to. So look for these. There are a few hearts. I'm going to give you guys the option of getting a heart that's already bisected or getting a heart that you bisect yourself. A few of the ones that I passed out that were already bisected had some pretty good examples of semilunar valves, okay? So they're going to be white in color, and they're just going to be little bubble wrap areas in the tops. You're only really going to be able to, or I anticipate you're only going to be able to see the one that leads to the aorta, so you're only going to be able to find the aortic valve, because the pulmonary valve is way up in the right atrium. Usually, if you use your hand, you can actually like shove your fingers through the semilunar valves, and your finger will come out the correct vessels. So if you were to shove it through the left ventricle, you want to shove like your finger up towards the middle if you're going to do this, because the valves actually kind of cross in the middle of the heart. It'll come out the aorta. The right atrium leading to the pulmonary trunk is actually really hard to do. For whatever reason, that passageway is really, really long. So unless you have like ridiculously long fingers, you probably won't be able to do it. So for that one, what you can do is you can use one of the blue pointers and put the pointing end up, so not the pointy end, but the blue part. You can use that to kind of wiggle your way through and point it out that way. And if you do that, and you can find the passageway, that can sometimes give you clues to where the valves are. All right. That's basically it for valves. So I guess the last two things to cover are the trabeculae carinae. That's again just the lattice that we see inside of the heart. I covered chordae tendineae and papillary muscles. Interventricular septum is essentially it's the myocardial layer that splits the left and right ventricles. You'll see that again on this side as well. Now for the 3 layers, you'll be able to say those pretty clearly. And the key with this, when we pin them, is that we're going to be asking for the layers. Okay, so note that. If we put the pin on the border right here, then we'd be asking for the endocardium. So we'd pin the endocardium, but we'd put it close to like where we'd be showing the layers in this region. So here, for example, or over here, and we'd, again, be asking the question, identify the layer for endocardium. Then the meaty portion here that makes up the middle, the myocardium, myo for muscle. And then the outer layer here that kind of looks like that fatty layer, that would be the the epicardium. We'd actually be able to pin that layer because it's pretty clear that it is the epicardium at that point. Okay, any questions? Yes?